Emperor. For the Empire.
Chapter I. The weight of holy light asterisk greater than in the heart of the hive. Faith burns brightest, because the darkness hungers deepest. The cathedral rose like a wound in the skyline. Steel spires pierced the low, suffocating clouds, their blackened tips wreathed in fumes, and the faint shimmer of sanctified flame. Beneath them, a billion souls stirred, the citizens of Hive, Damaris Primus, nameless, numberless, and bent beneath the weight of the Imperium's endless labor. They worked, they prayed, they died, and in their silence, I spoke for the Emperor. Asterisk, the vox horns trembled as I began the morning sermon. Asterisk, my voice echoed through the cavernous nave, carried by ancient speakers that had long since fused with soot and rust. I spoke not as a man, but as a conduit, a trembling vessel of a god whose gaze no mortal has ever seen. The words were ritual, old as Terra itself. Each syllable, a chain. Each prayer, a blade turned against despair. Asterisk, by his light, we endure. By his will, we are judged. By his silence, we are tested. Asterisk, the crowd responded in kind. Their voices dull and broken, more reflex than devotion. Asterisk, I could smell them, the rot of unwashed bodies, the chemical reek of re-sick food and machine oil that clung to every breath. And yet, amid the filth and fatigue, I saw it, the flicker of faith, small, dying, but there. Asterisk, behind me, incense thickened the air. Golden censers swung on rusted chains, spilling smoke like divine mist. In that haze, the stained glass visage of the Emperor loomed above the altar, his eyes hollow, his halo cracked. Light from the manufactoria below glimmered faintly through the cracks, like false stars in an iron sky. Asterisk, I knelt, feeling the cold metal beneath my knees. Asterisk, the chapel was vast, but I felt no grandeur, only the echo of my own uncertainty. I had preached 1,000 sermons, absolved 1,000 sinners, burned 100 heretics. And yet, the silence never broke. No voice, no warmth, no divine reply. Asterisk, was I heard? Asterisk, or was I merely shouting into the void, hoping that my own echo would sound like faith? When the liturgy ended, I stood alone before the altar. The congregation dispersed back into the underhiv's black arteries, back to their machines. Their masters, their slow decay, their absence left only echoes. Footsteps, distant, the metallic whisper of closing gates. The pulse of the hive resumed, eternal and indifferent. Asterisk, I removed my mask, the rebreather that marked me as a priest of the Minis Tu Rum. Asterisk, my breath fogged the cold air. Without the mask, I felt human again, vulnerable, mortal. The scent of incense and oil clung to my robes. Beneath the layers of ceremonial cloth, my body trembled, not from age, but from exhaustion of spirit. Asterisk, faith was not peace. It was war. Asterisk, war against entropy, war against doubt, war against the seductive whisper that the Emperor had never cared. Each prayer I uttered was a weapon forged from desperation. Each word, a defiance hurled into the abyss. And yet the abyss stared back. Asterisk, outside the cathedral, the hive stretched endlessly, vertical cities of rust and agony. Asterisk, from the upper spires, where nobles dwelled in pale luxury, to the deepest sublevels, where light never reached, everything was bound by the same truth. The Emperor protects, or so they said. Asterisk, I watched as the sky boiled with pollution. the faint glow of distant orbital fires painting the smog crimson. In the streets below, pilgrims crawled toward shrines, dragging offerings of bone and scrap. Enforcers watched them with dead eyes. Service skulls hovered like flies around carrion, recording every act of faith for the Administratum archives. A child stumbled near the cathedral gate barefoot, malnourished, holding a candle too small for the wind. I descended the steps, my robes whispering like torn parchment. The boy's eyes lifted to mine, eyes too old for his years. Is he watching? He asked. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him the Emperor's gaze never falters, that he sees every soul, every prayer. But as I looked upon the dying flame in that trembling hand, I found only silence in my heart. Keep the candle lit, I whispered instead. That is how he finds you. The boy nodded, and ran off into the fog. That night, I returned to my cell within the cathedral's lower sanctum, a small chamber of cold stone and flickering loot. My desk was littered with relic fragments, prayer scrolls, and cracked devotional seals. A single shrine sat against the wall, a worn aquila carved from ship metal, its wings uneven, its center darkened by soot from my endless offerings. I lit a stick of incense, kneeling before it. The smoke curled like a serpent, and my mind drifted. I thought of the countless sermons I had given, the thousands of lives that had come and gone beneath my gaze, the endless repetition of faith, unreturned. Every priest is taught that the Emperor's silence is proof of his divine endurance, that his will speaks through stillness. But some nights, that silence feels less like endurance, and more like absence. I lowered my head. Why do you not answer? The words escaped before I could stop them. Why must your servants burn while you remain unseen? No reply came. Only the hum of the hive beyond the walls. A ceaseless industrial heartbeat, the sound of faith being drowned in machinery. Sleep never came easily. I dreamt of fire, of battlefields where angels made of iron burned the sky with plasma. I saw cities consumed by faith and flame alike. And through it all, the Emperor's throne stood cold, golden, empty. When I woke, I found my hands shaking. A fine layer of ash coated the altar. The incense had burned itself out while I slept in prayer. A bad omen, as dawn broke. I prepared once again for the sermon. Outside, the bells of the Ministorum tolled, not with beauty, but with hunger. Their chime echoed through metal corridors like the groaning of a dying titan. The faithful gathered again, eyes hollow, faces gaunt. They sought meaning in my words. I sought meaning in their eyes. Perhaps both of us were lost. But I spoke. I always spoke. Because silence, in the Imperium, is death. Greater than yet, even in that silence, a shadow stirred, something ancient and heretical, whispering from beyond the reach of light. Greater than faith, is the Emperor's chosen weapon, and I am but the trembling hand that holds it. Morning came to Hive Damaris Primus, not with sunlight, but with the dull glow of the reactor spires. The sky was a bruise of smoke and iron, the air tasted of ozone and oil. Even the dawn here was mechanical, a cycle of flickering, lumen flares that signaled the start of another day of labor and prayer. The Emperor's light was not the light of a sun, it was the light of endurance, of machinery, of devotion wrapped in rust. The bells of the Ministorum rang again, deep, metallic, unrelenting. I ascended the stairs to the main pulpit, my bones aching beneath my robes. Around me servitors shuffled through clouds of incense, their flesh fused with cogitators and voximeters, endlessly repeating the same invocations. The Emperor protects. The Emperor endures. The Emperor is all, but, as I passed them, I noticed something that unsettled me. One servitor, designation MXS-32, had stopped chanting. Its jaw hung slack, its augmetic eyes flickering. A thin wisp of smoke rose from its cranial port, carrying the faint scent of burned flesh. A malfunction, perhaps, or a sign. In the Imperium, such distinctions often blur. I placed my hand upon its head, whispering the rite of purity, and deactivated it. The metal shell slumped to the floor, incense still rising around its corpse. The act should have been routine, but the silence that followed felt wrong, too heavy, to deliberate. Another failure, I murmured. And somewhere deep inside, a thought I dared not voice stirred, or another sacrifice. As the faithful gathered once more, I began the morning service. Today's sermon was on endurance, on how the Emperor had endured 10,000 years of stillness upon the golden throne, sustaining mankind through the immensity of his will alone. The scriptural texts demanded reverence, but my voice wavered. Brothers and sisters, I said, standing beneath the fractured statue of the God Emperor. The flesh of man rots, the stars fade, but the light of his purpose burns beyond death. The Emperor needs no voice, for his silence is eternal command. A pause. In the crowd, I saw faces tired, gaunt, yearning. Mothers clutching infants that would never see the sky. Laborers with hands scarred by endless toil. Soldiers with augmetic limbs, their eyes hollow from memories of war. They stared at me not as a priest, but as a bridge, the last fragile link between themselves and something holy. So I gave them what they needed, fire. My words became flame. I spoke of purity, of sacrifice, of the glory of obedience. I condemned the heretic, the mutant, the doubter. I called upon the Emperor's light to scour the unworthy. The more I spoke, the louder they became, their voices rising in fervor, in desperation, in fear disguised as faith. And yet, I could not feel him. After the sermon, a woman approached me. Her clothes were threadbare, her face streaked with soot. She carried a child wrapped in blood-stained cloth. Father, she whispered, my son has been marked by the machine spirits. His body twists in the night. The Medicae will not help us. They say it is mutation. Her voice cracked, but he is only a child. I looked upon the bundle. The child's flesh shimmered faintly, as though veins of light ran beneath translucent skin. His eyes were wide and unblinking, strange, yes, but innocent. Mutation, perhaps. Or perhaps something far worse. In the Imperium, mercy and heresy are often indistinguishable. I felt the eyes of others upon me. The congregation waited. The priest must decide. I felt the weight of scripture in my hands. The purity seals on my robe seemed to tighten like chains. The Emperor tests us, I said quietly. Sometimes through suffering, sometimes through the ones we love. She fell to her knees, clutching my robes. Please, save him. I hesitated. In that moment, I saw not a heresy, but a plea, not corruption, but love. And that terrified me more than any demon could. I raised my hand, performing the sign of the Aquila. Take him home, I whispered. Pray, keep him hidden. The Emperor's will shall be done. Her eyes widened, relief and terror mixed in equal measure. She bowed, then vanished into the crowd. I stood there long after she was gone, knowing what I had done. I had defied doctrine. I had shown mercy, and mercy. In the Imperium is the first step toward damnation. Night fell again, if such a thing could be said in a hive that never sleeps. From my cell, I could hear the chanting of the penitents below, voices echoing through the stone corridors as they flayed their own flesh in devotion. I pressed my palms together, whispering prayers to drown the memory of that mother and her child. But the thought gnawed at me. Had I betrayed my faith, or remembered my humanity? The line between them had blurred long ago. I reached for the scripture, flipping through brittle pages. Their edges burned from years of candle flame. My eyes lingered on a single verse, one forbidden, one I was never meant to read aloud. Asterisk, greater than in silence, he tests the faithful, but in silence also lies the truth of man, that faith is not heard, but endured. A chill crawled through me. That verse had been removed from modern catechisms centuries ago. Asterisk, it spoke not of worship, but of endurance, of a God who does not save, but watches as his servants break. Asterisk, was that heresy? Asterisk, or revelation? I closed the book, trembling. Asterisk, later. A courier arrived, a thin acolyte from the upper ministorm, clad in robes of parchment and wax. His face was hidden beneath a mask of bone-white porcelain. Asterisk, message for Confessor Arcton, he said, voice distorted through vox-filters. Asterisk, I took the scroll from his hand. It bore the sigil of the Ordo Hereticus. My heart froze. The Inquisition. Asterisk. Their name was both a prayer and a death sentence. Asterisk, breaking the seal. I read the script etched in ink, so dark it seemed to bleed into the parchment. Asterisk, report to Subspire Delta Sanctum. There are whispers of doctrinal impurity among the clergy. You are to investigate and purify. Asterisk, by his light, truth shall burn. Inquisitor Helbricht of the Ordo Hereticus. The irony struck me like a blade. Asterisk, I was to hunt heresy. On the same day I had committed it. Asterisk, I folded the parchment and pressed it against my chest, feeling its weight. The Emperor, in his infinite silence, had answered, but not with comfort. With punishment? Asterisk. I prepared my things, incense, a laspistol, blessed by a dozen rituals, and the worn Aquila pendant I had carried since ordination. Asterisk, before leaving, I glanced once more at the shrine. The candle flame flickered, weak but unyielding. Asterisk, guide me, I whispered. Asterisk, but I did not know if I spoke to the Emperor, or to my own fading faith. Asterisk, the corridors leading to the lower sanctum were long and dim, lined with shrines, relics, and ancient tapestries, depicting saints burned alive in the Emperor's name. Every footstep echoed like a heartbeat in the tomb of faith. Asterisk, when I reached the sanctum door, I felt it, a coldness, not of temperature, but of presence. Asterisk, as though something unseen waited beyond, patient and hungry. Asterisk, I pressed the activation rune. The door hissed open. Asterisk, the smell hit me first. Incense and blood. Asterisk, the Emperor's light reveals all things, but even holy light casts shadows, and it was into that shadow I was now called to walk. Faith burns brightest when surrounded by darkness, yet in that same fire, something human begins to die. Asterisk, the sanctum was not as I remembered it. Once, it had been a chamber of worship, a place where the choir of penitents sang hymns through vox amplifiers, their voices shaking the iron walls. Now, it was silent, empty, save for the faint hum of dormant machinery and the crackling of half-dead candles guttering in their brass holders. Asterisk. The altar at the room's center was defiled, smeared with ash and something darker. Dried blood, streaked into the shape of a broken Aquila. Asterisk, I froze. The symbol was wrong, inverted, fractured, a blasphemy whispered in iconography. Asterisk, kneeling beside the altar, I traced the lines of the mark. Beneath my fingers, the metal was cold, but it pulsed faintly. The corruption was not merely physical, it was spiritual, a heresy that bled through matter itself. Asterisk, from the shadows, a voice spoke, hoarse, aged, trembling with zeal and fear. Confessor Arcton, you came. Asterisk, I turned. Deacon Malvern emerged from the darkness, his once immaculate robes tattered and stained with soot. His eyes gleamed with the fever of one who had seen too much. I was told there were whispers, I said. Speak. Malvern's lips twisted. Not whispers. Screams. There is rot in the flock, father. The hymns falter. The faithful question his silence. They say the Emperor has turned his gaze away from this world. The words struck like daggers, heresy spoken plainly. Yet his voice held more sorrow than rebellion. They are frightened, Malvern continued, and in their fear, they seek meaning in places forbidden. I have seen the signs, candles lit to the wrong saints, offerings left at the feet of broken statues. Something moves beneath the faith, confessor. Something old. I stepped closer. Show me. He led me through a hidden arch behind the altar, a tunnel of rusted pipes and dripping condensation that smelled of decay and oil. At the end lay a door sealed with wax sigils and purity chains. Each one bore the mark of the ecclesiarchy, yet many were broken. When the door opened, the stench of corruption rolled out like smoke from a pyre. Inside were relics, defiled icons, warped scriptures, bones carved with alien sigils, and in the center, a single candle still burning with unnatural light. Its flame, a sickly violet hue. Malvern fell to his knees. I have tried to purge it. I burned the scrolls, shattered the idols, cleansed the altar, but it returns. Every dawn, the flame rekindles. It will not die. I stared at the flame. It danced as though aware, casting shapes upon the walls that twisted into faces. The longer I watched, the more they seemed to whisper words without sound, syllables that coiled through thought rather than air. Do you hear it too? Malvern asked. I did not answer. Because yes, I heard it. And the voice was not foreign. It was familiar. It was mine. That night, I returned to my cell, carrying the memory of that violet flame like a sickness. I tried to pray, but each word of devotion tasted hollow. The incense thickened the air, suffocating, cloying, as though even the smoke doubted the sanctity of its offering. I thought of the mother and child again, of the broken Aquila, of the silence, and I wondered if faith, like flesh, could rot. Later, I dreamt, though dreams in the Imperium are seldom innocent. I stood before the golden throne. The Emperor sat motionless, his form vast, radiant, and terrible. The sound of machines filled the chamber, a symphony of servitors and life-sustaining engines that had run for 10 millennia. I tried to speak, but my voice was gone. From the shadows, a whisper came. Not in words, but in meaning. Do you still believe? I tried to fall to my knees, but the floor was ash. My body sank, my hands burning as I grasped at nothing. He does not speak, the voice murmured. He never has. The faith you serve is your own echo, reverberating through eternity. When I woke, I was screaming. Morning came again, though it felt meaningless. I washed in silence, dressed in my robes, and prepared for the inspection by the Inquisition. I expected agents of the Ordo Hereticus, cold, efficient, merciless. Instead, I found one man waiting at the chapel's gate. He was tall, his coat dark and heavy with sigils. A rosette glimmered at his throat, its wings spread in judgment. Inquisitor Halbrecht, he said, his voice iron. You will assist in purifying this hive's faith. Report everything. No detail is trivial. His gaze lingered on me, searching, dissecting. You are trembling, confessor. The Emperor's work demands much, I replied. Indeed, and sometimes it demands more than we wish to give. His words carried the weight of prophecy. We entered together. The investigation began. Days passed, in fire and shadow. Heresy was routed out with blade and flamer. Scriptures were rewritten, voices silenced. The Emperor's light, we said, was purging impurity, but the smoke of the burned faithful told another story. The line between cleansing and slaughter blurred until it vanished. Each night, I returned to the sanctum and found the violet flame still burning, untouched by time or fire. Each night, I prayed before it. Each night, I felt less human. One evening, Halbrecht came to me. Confessor, the records show you once served on Salther 4 during the uprising there. Yes, I said. You ordered the execution of an entire congregation suspected of harboring 53 men, women, and children. I looked down. They were tainted. Were they? He studied me, expression unreadable. Or were you simply afraid? His question lingered like a wound. For a moment, I hated him because he had spoken aloud what I could not even think. Halbrecht turned toward the window slit, watching the distant smog storms sweep through the hive spires. Faith is a weapon, Confessor, but every weapon dulls. When it does, it must be reforged in pain. And then he left, leaving only silence, that same devouring silence that haunted every prayer. That night, I did not dream. I heard, a whisper, a call, from the sanctum below. I followed it, candle in hand, until I stood once more before that forbidden altar. The violet flame still burned, steady, waiting. This time, I did not resist. I reached toward it. The fire did not burn. It was cold. And within that coldness, I felt something vast, an ocean of thought and faith and despair, endless and consuming. It whispered, not blasphemy, but truth. You are not my servant. You are my voice. And my voice must suffer, so others may believe. I fell to my knees, sobbing not from terror, but from revelation. For in that moment, I realized something dreadful. Perhaps the Emperor does speak, and perhaps his voice is pain. But the voice of the divine is never gentle, and the creeded commands would soon consume all I had left of my soul. Beneath the sanctum of the Emperor's cathedral, the earth opens like a wound. Old stone arches, carved with forgotten names, bow under the weight of centuries. The priest descends, a single flame in his hand, the light of a candle flickering against the abyss. Each step echoes like the tolling of a funeral bell. The air grows colder. The scent of oil and decay fills the lungs. Here, in the lowest crypts, lie the bones of saints and martyrs, and those who failed. Their skulls stare from alcoves, empty-eyed, mouths forever open in silent hymns. The priest kneels before them, placing the candle in a brass holder. He whispers the canticle of redemption. From dust we came, to dust we return. May our faith endure when flesh fails. His voice trembles. For even here, surrounded by the faithful dead, he feels the chill of something unseen, the shadow of doubt creeping in like rot. He bows his head. The flame flickers. And in the wavering light, one of the skulls seems to move. The priest does not flee. He dares not. His entire existence is built upon obedience. He grips his rosaries, pressing its metal edges into his palm, until blood seeps between his fingers. The shadow before him shifts. Not demonic, not fully real, but something deeper. It is his own fear, given voice by the whispering dark. Greater than you, speak of his light, it hisses, but you have never seen him. You pray for salvation, yet you doubt every word. How can a man preach purity when his heart trembles? The priest clenches his teeth. He recites the litanies of defiance. Faith is the shield, obedience the blade. The Emperor protects. The whisper becomes a roar. The shadows burst outward, taking form writhing silhouettes of the fallen, the corrupted, the forgotten. He raises the censer, swinging it in wide arcs. The sacred smoke burns the air, driving back the phantoms. One by one, they dissolve into ash and silence. When it ends, the priest collapses to his knees, exhausted, trembling, weeping. He is alone again, but the candle still burns. He returns to the upper sanctum at dawn. The stained glass of the basilica catches the first light of a distant sun, pale and sickly through the smog, but still light. The priest looks upon it and whispers, "Greater than he spoke to me." Not through words, but through trial. Not through vision, but through suffering. In his fear, he found clarity. The Emperor's light is not the absence of darkness, but the strength to face it. He takes his place before the altar once more. His voice is raw, but steady. Greater than brothers. Sisters, the Emperor does not demand that we see him. He demands that we believe, even when our eyes are blind. The congregation kneels. Some cry, some merely bow their heads. But in that moment, faith becomes something real, not a doctrine, not an order, but a fire that burns within the soul. Weeks pass. The priest travels beyond the city, into the wastelands, where pilgrims crawl on bleeding knees. He carries the relics of his cathedral on his back. A suverocula, a censer, and a weathered copy of the Lectitio Divinitatis. He preaches in ruins. He blesses the bones of soldiers. He stands upon the edge of an abyss and cries out, even here, the Emperor watches, and the people believe. For his voice carries conviction forged in the fire of doubt. As the years pass, his beard grows gray, his eyes weary, but his resolve unbroken. He no longer seeks signs or miracles. He is the miracle, a man who found faith in the ruins of certainty. When he finally returns to the basilica, now half buried by time and dust, he lights the same candle he carried into the crypts long ago. The flame catches instantly. It burns steady, unwavering. He smiles faintly. Then, in a voice hoarse but filled with peace, he whispers, greater than the Emperor's light, never fades. It burns in those who dare to carry it. The camera pans upward, through the ruined ceiling, through the gray skies of a dying world, up into the void between stars, until it reaches the golden shimmer of the pulsing like the heart of humanity itself. Greater than, and across the endless dark, the faithful walk, bearing torches made of their own souls. The Imperium endures, because faith endures. Chapter 2. The Creed of a Dying Galaxy. The Emperor's light does not fade. It is only obscured by the dust of a dying galaxy. I have walked beneath cathedrals built from the bones of titans, and I have knelt in the ashes of worlds, where the only sermons left were whispered by the wind. I have seen faith carved into steel, burned into flesh, and buried beneath rubble. In every corner of the Imperium, the same truth remains. Belief is the only thing that survives decay. When the cities crumble, when the stars die, when the last soldier breathes his last breath beneath the blackened banners of the Aquila, there will still be one voice murmuring, "The Emperor protects." That is the nature of man. We endure through faith, even when faith devours us. The ecclesiarchy calls itself the soul of humanity. But the soul has long since been sold for survival. Once, our creed was a prayer. Now, it is a weapon. A weapon wielded not by saints, but by men desperate to control the fire they claim to serve. Long before my own life began, before I ever raised my voice upon the pulpit, there was a time when faith was fractured. The age of apostasy, a cataclysm of devotion twisted into tyranny. The ministorum fell into corruption. Its high lords grew fat on offerings meant for the emperor. Cardinals ruled like kings, their words law across 1,000 systems. The poor starved beneath the weight of their piety, and the holy shrines echoed with hypocrisy. It was then that the Imperium bled not from war, but from belief. Faith had become currency, salvation bought and sold with blood. The name of the emperor, once a cry of reverence, became a justification for slaughter. Yet from that abyss came rebirth. Sebastian Thor, prophet, reformer, the flame that purified corruption with truth, rose from the dust. He did not come with armies or relics, but with words. And words, in the Imperium, are more deadly than any bolter. He spoke of humility, of service, of duty without vanity. He tore down the palaces of false saints and rebuilt the church of the emperor upon its original truth that faith is not domination, but endurance. But centuries change all things. What began as devotion becomes doctrine. What begins as humility becomes hierarchy. The new ecclesiarchy, reforged in the fires of reform, once again grew vast, sprawling across the stars, like veins of light in the dark. Its priests filled the voids between worlds. Its missionaries walked among soldiers and slaves alike. The sermons became endless, the litanies infinite, and yet, the further we spread, the quieter his voice became. The priest, any priest, becomes both shepherd and warden. He must tend to the flock and call the heretic. He must inspire hope and deliver judgment. His hands baptize and execute in the same breath. There is no mercy in our creed, only purpose. Every morning, I recite the benediction of flame. May the fire burn in me as it burns in the stars. May I consume doubt as the pyre consumes flesh. It is not poetry. It is survival, because in the Imperium, belief is not a choice. It is the air one breathes, the blood that runs through the veins of every citizen. To doubt is to invite death. To question is to court damnation. We priests are not men of comfort. We are engines of conviction. Our robes are woven with threads of fear and hope alike. We are the voice of the emperor made flesh. Even if the flesh trembles beneath the weight of that voice. There are worlds where the sun never rises. Hive worlds where smoke blots out the sky, where the air tastes of iron and oil. There, faith becomes survival. Sermons echo from vox towers built upon mountains of corpses. The poor gather in the shadow of cathedrals that pierce the smog, their cracked lips murmuring words they barely understand. I have stood before them, the starving, the diseased, the broken, and I have told them that their pain has meaning, that every suffering is a tithe, every tear a prayer. I have seen them believe it. I have seen them die with smiles on their faces, whispering his name as the world around them burned. There are days I wonder if that is mercy or cruelty. The ecclesiarchy does not ask us to understand the emperor. It asks us to obey him. Obedience is purity. Purity is survival. We are taught that he watches all, that his gaze never falters, but in the silence between prayers. I sometimes wonder if that gaze is gone entirely. Still, the machinery of faith continues. The ministorum is a machine older than memory. Its cogs are men and women, born, broken, and replaced in unending rhythm. Confessors, missionaries, preachers, cardinals, each serves their role, like organs in a vast, sacred body. When one fails, another takes its place. The sermons never stop. The prayers never die. In the great ecclesiarchal archives of Ophelia 7, the records speak of 1 billion liturgies, catalogued and sealed. Each prayer a weapon, each hymn a fortress. The administratum quantifies them, measures devotion by data. I have seen the scrolls, endless shelves of parchment older than stars, their ink fading like the breath of ghosts. They say, the emperor hears every word. I wonder if he can still distinguish them from noise. Faith, in the Imperium, is both armor and chain. It shields us from despair, but it also binds us to it. Once, during my novitiate, an old confessor told me, we do not serve the emperor because he answers us. We serve him because he cannot. I did not understand then. Now I do. To live in this galaxy is to accept silence as truth. The creed teaches that the Emperor is the light in the darkness, the divine spark that burns within every soul. But when that light flickers, we do not question, we build more candles. We drown the void in fire until the darkness cannot be seen. That is the way of man, from shrine worlds to war zones, from pilgrim fleets to void monasteries, drifting among dead stars. The priests of the Ministorum carry that light. They walk barefoot upon the ashes of exterminated worlds, whispering benedictions to bones. They preach to the condemned as they march to the gallows. They anoint the cannons of imperial warships before battle. Their voices echo across every theater of war, reminding mankind that salvation and damnation are one and the same flame. I have met priests who wear power armor instead of robes, warrior chaplains of the ecclesiarchy's militant arms. I have seen them bless their weapons with the names of saints, their chainswords roaring with holy fury. Their sermons are not of peace, but of purgation. They speak of cleansing, of purity through fire. They believe that redemption can be found only through the annihilation of the impure dot in their eyes. Every bullet fired in his name is a prayer. Perhaps they are right, or perhaps they are mad. In truth, there is little difference left between the two. The creed of the Imperium has changed so many times that its origin is lost. What was once scripture is now law. What was once faith is now weaponized obedience. The holy tracts of St. Praxis speak of love, love of the Emperor, love of mankind. Those passages are now censored, replaced with verses extolling punishment and purity. The galaxy decays, and so does belief. But it does not die, it mutates. I have seen entire worlds enslaved by their own piety, planets where every child is branded with the Aquila at birth, where even the act of breathing without recitation of the catechism is considered sin. In the deep hive catacombs, confessional engines grind unceasingly massive machines into which the faithful pour their sins. Their whispers recorded by sacred cogitators. The machines never stop listening. Faith is not comfort. Faith is the mechanism that keeps the Imperium alive, long after hope has perished. It drives men to fight wars they cannot win, to die for gods who will not answer, to burn their own flesh in the name of a light they can no longer see. That is what the ecclesiarchy preserves, not salvation, endurance. I once read a line in the Liber Exaltus: the Emperor is not our savior. He is our endurance made manifest. Perhaps that is the only truth left. And so, the sermons continue. Every priest, every missionary, every confessor, we are taught to speak with unshakable certainty, even when our hearts tremble. We are taught to guide, even when lost. Because, in the Imperium, hesitation is heresy. Greater than yet, even as I preached the creed across 1,000 worlds, I began to see the cracks in my own devotion, and I learned that the truest test of faith does not come from the pulpit, but from the silence that follows it. Chapter 3. The burden of the pulpit. The Emperor's light does not falter, but those who bear it do. The days begin long before dawn in the underhives of Vardis Prime. The air tastes of rust and recirculated despair. The faithful gather in silence, their eyes hollow, their breath rising in clouds beneath the glow of lumen shrines. I stand among them, their priest, their voice, their confessor, and I feel the weight of their belief pressing down upon me heavier than the robes I wear. Every morning, I light the incense and whisper the invocation of endurance. The smoke coils upward like dying prayers, clinging to the vaulted ceiling of the chapel before fading into nothing. I speak the sacred words, not for the Emperor, but for myself. Because if I stop speaking, the silence will devour me. My voice echoes through the steel cathedral, carried by broken vox amplifiers. Each syllable fractures, distorted by age, like an old truth retold by a dying world. The people listen, not because they understand, but because they must. For them, faith is not belief, it is habit, it is survival. They bow their heads, not out of reverence, but out of fear. Fear of sin, fear of punishment, fear of being seen as anything less than devout. I see it in their trembling hands, in their muttered repetitions of the creed. The Emperor protects, the Emperor forgives, the Emperor sees. But deep within their eyes, I see something else, a hollow space where hope once lived, and yet I cannot falter. My every word is a blade, and if I sheath it, the darkness will take them. That is the burden of the pulpit. To preach light you can no longer feel. Each sermon is a ritual of exhaustion. I raise my hands to award the golden effigy above the altar, the Emperor in his eternal agony, seated upon his throne, and I beg him for strength. The candles flicker, the statues stare, but there is no answer. Only the hum of the chapel's generators, and the slow creak of metal as the hive shifts beneath its own weight. After every service, the confessions begin. A line forms hundreds of penitents, each dragging the chains of their guilt. They kneel before me, whispering their sins through tears and blood. Some confess to theft, others to blasphemy, a few to things far darker, heretical thoughts, whispers of doubt, dreams of freedom. I listen, I nod, I absolve. And with each confession, a piece of my soul turns to ash. There are times when I cannot tell whether I am forgiving them, or myself. One man confessed that he had stopped praying. He said he no longer felt the Emperor's presence, that the stars above looked empty. I told him to recite the Catechism of Devotion 1,000 times and cleanse his body in the purifying fires of penitence. He obeyed. The next day, he was found dead, his body burned, his lips still mouthing the final verse. The parish called it faith. I called it fear. But in the Imperium, there is no difference. The Ministorum teaches that compassion is holy, but mercy is dangerous. Pity the sinner, but punish the sin. To love mankind is to purge its corruption. We priests are taught to be surgeons of the soul, cutting away rot before it spreads. But when the disease is everywhere, when every man carries it in his heart, the blade never rests. I remember the first time I witnessed public penance. A heretic dragged before the crowd, his tongue nailed to a board, his eyes burned clean of sin. The people cheered as the flame consumed him, their voices rising in rapture. Children threw offerings into the pyre, their faces lit by the glow. They called it redemption. I remember standing there, hands clasped in prayer, feeling the heat against my skin. And in that moment, I realized something terrible. That faith, once awakened, does not distinguish between mercy and madness. It only hungers. Every priest must learn to feed that hunger, to channel it, shape it, weaponize it, because if you do not, it will consume you instead. And so, I learned, I learned to speak with fire in my voice even when my heart was cold. I learned to deliver judgment without hesitation. I learned that doubt is a sin that spreads faster than any plague. I learned to fear silence. Each night, I returned to my quarters, a narrow cell beneath the chapel, its walls lined with scorched iron. I kneeled before a single candle and whispered the lamentation of duty. My knees ache, my throat burns. I tell myself, it is worth it, that through my suffering, others may find salvation. But as the candle burns lower, I find myself asking questions that no priest should ask. What if the Emperor is not listening? What if he never was? And then I remember the heretics who once asked the same, and I remember what became of them. So I whisper louder, drowning the doubt beneath the roar of prayer. There are times when the ecclesiarchy sends me beyond the hive, to the outlying districts, where faith has grown thin and whispers of heresy fester like wounds. I travel with a retinue of guards and flagellants, penitent men whose flesh is torn by chains. their blood dripping onto the cracked stone as we march. Asterisk, we find the faithless. We remind them of the Emperor's mercy. We burn away their disbelief with sacred fire. The smoke rises into the heavens, carrying the scent of purification. The people watch from the shadows, their faces illuminated by the flames, and I tell them, behold his light. Let it cleanse you. Asterisk, sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see their faces, the ones who screamed my name as they burned. I see the children clutching their mothers, begging for salvation. I tell myself they were sinners, that their death was holy, that the Emperor demanded it. But the truth gnaws at me in the dark. What if they were simply afraid? Asterisk, what if I was too? Asterisk, faith, they say, is the armor of the soul. But armor can become a tomb. Asterisk, as the years pass, the sermons grow longer, the faces blur together, and the words lose meaning. I speak, but I do not believe. I command, but I do not feel. My faith has become routine, a performance played out across an endless stage of suffering. The people see a holy man. They do not see the cracks beneath the robe. Asterisk, I have begun to envy the martyrs. Their certainty, their finality. Asterisk, to die for belief is simple. To live for it, that is the true agony. Asterisk, there is one ritual I dread more than any other, the execution of heresy. The ecclesiarchy demands that each priest witness at least one such act each month to remind us of our duty. The condemned are brought before us. Their crimes recited: blasphemy, apostasy, corruption. The crowd watches in silence. Asterisk, we raise the relic flamer. We speak the words, asterisk, may your sins be purged in holy flame, and then we burn them. The screams echo through the cathedrals, mingling with the hymns. The air fills with the stench of sanctified flesh. I tell myself, it is justice. That this is what the Emperor demands. Asterisk, but sometimes, I think I hear laughter in the fire. Asterisk, and I wonder if it belongs to the Emperor, or to something else entirely. Asterisk, there are whispers among the clergy of priests who broke beneath the weight of devotion. Some vanished into the wastelands, preaching to ghosts. Others turned their sermons toward darker gods. We call them apostates. But I understand them, because there are nights when I feel the same pull, the same temptation to let go, to stop pretending that I understand what holiness truly is. Asterisk, perhaps faith is not the answer. Perhaps it is the question. Asterisk, still, I rise each morning. I light the candles. I preach, because the people need me, because without me, their fragile belief would crumble, and the darkness would win. Asterisk, that is the lie I tell myself, that I serve them. In truth, I serve my fear. Asterisk, the burden of the pulpit is not the weight of duty. It is the knowledge that every word spoken in his name must be perfect, even when you no longer know what perfection means. Asterisk, greater than but one day. The sermons were drowned by screams, and the fire I had preached for so long came for me. Asterisk. Chapter 4. The Flames of Redemption. Asterisk, greater than fire cleanses, fire judges. Fire remembers what flesh and faith forget. Asterisk, that is what I was taught in the Schola Progenium, that through flame, sin is made visible, and through its pain, the Emperor's mercy is revealed. But mercy, in the Imperium, is never gentle. It burns. It devours. It leaves only ash, and in that ash, the shape of truth. Asterisk, the cathedral bell tolled when the heretic was brought forth. A woman, pale, scarred, her robes torn and bloodied from the interrogator's hand. They said she had spoken blasphemy against the ecclesiarch, had whispered that the Emperor was dead, that his light no longer reached the lower hives. The crowd gathered like vultures. They wanted blood. They wanted proof that the divine still ruled above them. Asterisk, I stood at the steps of the pyre, my censer heavy with sacred oils. The smoke curled upward, mingling with the industrial haze that shrouded the hive sky. Around me, the choir mechanicus chanted hymns through vox-distorted throats, their machine voices merging with the wails of the penitent. The flame was not yet lit, and yet the air already trembled with heat. They handed me the torch. It was not my first execution, nor would it be my last, but every time, the same tremor seized my hand. The same voice inside whispered, "What if she is right?" She met my eyes before the fire claimed her. There was no fear there, only a terrible calm. "Do you hear him?" she asked, her voice steady even as the ropes bit into her wrists. "Does he speak to you, priest? Or do you burn us because you cannot bear his silence?" I said nothing. The torch fell. The flame bloomed like judgment incarnate, devouring cloth, skin, and doubt alike. The smell of burning flesh filled the square, carried on the wind like a psalm. The crowd chanted the emperor's name. Children wept, soldiers saluted, and I prayed, though I could no longer tell if it was for her soul or for mine. The fire burned for hours, and when the ashes cooled, I felt no lighter. The guilt had not been purged. It had multiplied. They call it redemption through flame, but redemption implies a return, a reclaiming of something lost. What we do is not redemption. It is erasure. The Imperium does not cleanse. It consumes. Still, the sermons demand it. The people demand it. So we build more pyres, write more litanies, sanctify more executions. Each one becomes a ritual of forgetting. I remember the first time I smelled human fat burning on a sanctified flame. I was young, eager to serve, still foolish enough to believe that the Emperor's light could be found in acts of destruction. The Inquisitor who trained me said, "Pity is the enemy of faith. Burn until you no longer feel." I have burned many since then. Heretics, witches, the lost, the mad, and once a friend. He was a priest, like me, older, wiser, but broken. He had seen too much. The endless confessions, the false miracles, the silence of the God he adored, they hollowed him out. One day, he began to speak of visions. He said the Emperor had spoken to him, not from Terra, but from within the warp itself. He said the throne was a lie. The Inquisition came swiftly. I was ordered to preside over his purification. The pyre was smaller that day, built in the courtyard of the seminary. He didn't resist. He only asked that I hold his hand as the fire rose. I did. And as his flesh blackened, he whispered, "Perhaps this is mercy after all." That night, I could not sleep. His words, his screams, the smell, they clung to me like oil. I washed until my skin bled. I prayed until dawn. But there was no peace, only the echo of his voice. Since then, the fire has never left me. It follows wherever I go in the light of candles, in the heat of the forge, in the eyes of the faithful who look to me for absolution. I see flame in everything. Sometimes, I think it is not the Emperor who watches us through the fire, but something older, something hungry. In the lower hives. They whisper of spirits that live within the pyre's souls, who were never granted peace, who linger, screaming in the embers. I dismissed such tales once. Now, I am not so certain. There are nights when I walk past the charred remains of an execution and swear I hear voices faint, pleading, half swallowed by the crackle of cooling coals. They call my name, and yet I cannot stop. The ecclesiarchy commands, and I obey. For every flame I light, 1,000 eyes see proof that the Emperor still rules. Faith must have spectacle. Faith must have blood. The next burning was different. A boy this time, barely 16, accused of harboring forbidden texts. His mother screamed as they dragged him through the square, begging for mercy. The crowd jeered. Mercy is heresy in the Imperium. Mercy implies weakness. When I lifted the torch again, My hand did not tremble. I told myself it was righteousness. I told myself it was justice. But as the flame took him, I saw his eyes wide, terrified, and shining with reflected light. He looked at me not as his executioner, but as if asking for meaning. What could I give him? What meaning can there be in a fire that burns children for the sin of curiosity? That night, I dreamt again of the Emperor's golden visage, the fire dancing across his sculpted features. But when he turned to look at me, his face was empty. No eyes, no mouth, only flame. When I awoke, I realized the truth I had long feared. We burned to feel his presence. The Emperor does not speak. The fire speaks for him. Redemption, then, is not found in forgiveness. It is found in surrender, the surrender of the self to the flame, the dissolution of doubt into smoke. There is a saying among the penitents, in fire, all men are equal. Perhaps that is true. The flame takes all without discrimination, sinner and saint alike. It purifies not by choice, but by hunger. So I continue. I light the pyres. I bless the oil. I speak the litanies of combustion. And as the flames rise, I tell myself that somewhere, within the roaring inferno, the Emperor watches, and that he understands what I cannot. But sometimes, I think the fire has learned to love me. It dances higher when I approach. It clings to my robes, my hands, my dreams. It whispers promises of peace, of purpose, of release. Perhaps that is my fate, not to be redeemed by flame, but to become it. Greater than, but even flame cannot burn away every shadow. Some scenes do not scream, they whisper. And in those whispers, I would soon hear the voice of the damned. Chapter 5. The silence of the Emperor greater than when the last ember dies. What remains of faith? The pyres have cooled. The crowds have dispersed. Only the scent of ash lingers, sweet, metallic, eternal. I stand before the ruins of the chapel, the same one where I once preached of hope, of duty, of divine light. Now, the altar is cracked, the candles drowned in soot, and the great mural of the Emperor is nothing but fractured glass staring back at me. There was a time when I believed the hum of the machinery was his heartbeat, the endless pulse of the Imperium itself. Now it sounds like decay. The reactors thrum below the city like a dying organ, bleeding power into temples that no longer hold prayer. I still wear my robes, though they are torn and blackened by smoke. Symbols of faith, they call them. But to me, they feel like a shroud, a burial cloth, for a man who forgot what he believed in. After the purge, I tried to speak again, to gather the faithful, and lead them in hymns of purification. But my voice faltered. The words of the canticle of judgment felt empty on my tongue. I had spoken them 1,000 times, yet now they sounded hollow, obscene even. Because when I close my eyes, I still see their faces, the men and women I condemned, their flesh alight with sacred fire. They screamed the Emperor's name as they burned, not in hatred but in hope. They believed they were being delivered into his embrace. I told them as much, but when I pray now, I hear nothing in return. The Emperor is silent. They say he sits upon his golden throne, his mind stretched across the void, guiding the astronomicon that lights humanity's way. Billions worship that light, billions die for it. But I have come to wonder, does the light care? We call it divine radiance, but it is also radiation, a wound in the warp made manifest. It burns brighter each century, consuming more lives to keep it fed. The tech priests call it sustenance. I call it sacrifice. And I am a priest of sacrifice. I still perform the rites. The rituals must continue. That is the law of the Ministorum. The people need their shepherds. Even when the shepherds have lost the flock, even when they have lost themselves. Asterisk in the mornings, I walk through the rubble of the cathedral, reciting blessings to the ghosts that linger there. Some nights, I think they answer, a whisper, a flicker of light. But when I turn, there is nothing, only echoes, only emptiness. Asterisk one day, a child approached me in the ruins. Her face was streaked with soot, her eyes too old for her small body. She asked, "Father, where is the Emperor now?" Asterisk I wanted to tell her the truth, that he is gone, that perhaps he was never there at all, but the words would not come. My duty chained my tongue, as it always had. So I smiled, a lie, and said, "He is within you, child, always watching." Asterisk she nodded, and for a moment, I saw faith reborn in her gaze. It should have comforted me. Instead, it broke something inside, because I knew she would grow into another voice like mine, preaching to the void, mistaking silence for divinity. Asterisk in the Imperium, belief is not sustained by proof. It is sustained by need. Humanity cannot exist without something to worship. The galaxy is too dark, too cold, too cruel. Without faith, we would look into the void and see ourselves reflected, and that would drive us mad. Asterisk so we keep believing. We build our faith from ash and fear. Asterisk the administratum calls it stability. The ecclesiarchy calls it salvation. But I call it inertia, the slow, endless motion of a dying machine. Every prayer is a gear turning, grinding, keeping the illusion alive. Asterisk once, I thought faith was a fire. Now, I see it is a machine, a colossal, divine engine that feeds upon its own believers. Asterisk in the depths of the hive, I have seen factories of worship, rows of servitors, wired into altars, their mouths moving in eternal prayer as their blood drips into collection trays, their bodies long since dead, their voices automated. The priests call them sacred automatons. I call them truth. Asterisk we are all like them, aren't we? Reciting words we no longer understand, bowing to idols that no longer listen. Asterisk the Inquisition would burn me for such thoughts. They would say I have strayed, that I am infected by heresy. Perhaps they are right. But what is heresy, if not faith unchained from control? Asterisk still, I continue. Because even a broken priest must serve. Even silence must be worshipped. Asterisk some nights, I kneel before the altar and whisper, "My Emperor, if you can hear me, give me a sign." Asterisk the candles flicker. The wind sighs through the shattered stained glass. Somewhere in the distance, a servo skull hums by, recording my blasphemy, but no sign comes. No voice, no vision. Only the same mechanical heartbeat of the Imperium, thudding, endless, empty. Asterisk, there was a time when I feared damnation. Now, I fear nothing at all. Asterisk because the absence of God is not death, it is eternity. Asterisk I have begun to understand why some turn to the ruinous powers. Not because they hate the Emperor, but because they crave to be seen. The warp answers, even if it lies. It whispers, it tempts, it speaks. Silence is harder to love, and yet, I cannot let it go. The silence is all I have left of him. Perhaps this, too, is faith to love a God who will never speak again. Asterisk there are days. I walk through the lower hives and hear the sermons of others, young priests, still ablaze with purpose, shouting of the Emperor's glory. I envy them. Their voices are strong, their conviction pure, but I see in them the seed of my own ruin. One day, they too will learn what I have learned, that the louder you preach, the quieter the Emperor becomes. Asterisk they say, the Emperor protects, but I have come to think that he does not protect us from the galaxy, he protects the galaxy from us. His silence is the barrier, his death, our prison. Asterisk and yet, despite everything, I still kneel, I still pray, because without prayer, there is nothing left of me. Asterisk faith, I have realized, is not the voice of God, It is the echo of humanity, refusing to die. One night, I dreamed of Terra. I saw the golden throne, the endless lines of priests and pilgrims ascending its steps, their skin peeling from radiation, their minds shattering from awe, and atop that mountain of flesh and devotion, I saw him, the Emperor, silent, unmoving. His eyes were not eyes but suns, and from his mouth poured the same fire I had once wielded in his name. He said nothing, but I understood. His silence was not absence, it was command. Endure. Endure the pain. Endure the doubt. Endure the silence. When I awoke, the cathedral's ruins glowed faintly, a trick of light, perhaps, or something more. The ashes on the altar stirred, rising like dust caught in dawn's first rays. For a heartbeat, it looked as if they formed a shape, a man kneeling in prayer. Then the wind took it away. I am alone again. But I am not afraid. Because maybe this is what faith was always meant to be. Not comfort, but endurance. Not an answer, but the strength to keep asking. And so, each morning, I light a single candle on the cracked altar. Its flame is small, fragile, defiant. I whisper, the first words I ever learned as a novice. The Emperor is my light, and through his silence, I endure. The candle burns until the wax dies. The silence remains. And in that silence, I find peace. Greater than, but peace is never the end. For faith, like the Imperium itself, does not die, it evolves, even when all that's left of it is dust and echo. Chapter 6. The Eternal Sermon. The fires of Krieg had long since faded to embers. But the priest remained. He had survived what none were meant to survive. The trenches, the bombardment, the slow suffocation of faith beneath the weight of endless war. He had watched generations of men born from the wombs of the manufactorums, raised to die before ever knowing what sunlight felt like on their skin. And now, as the galaxy burned anew, he wandered, an old, bent figure wrapped in a tattered greatcoat, carrying nothing but a scorched relic book and a cracked voximeter that whispered his sermons into the void. He no longer knew what world he walked upon. The names had long since bled together. Krieg, Vrax, Armageddon, Cadia, Vortania, all of them graves carved into the same corpse. The sky above was eternally gray, the earth beneath eternally black. And yet still, he preached. He came to them not as a conqueror, but as a shadow. A regiment of young soldiers, the 812th, newly raised, freshly clad in the Emperor's gray, found him on the outskirts of a collapsed cathedral. They had come seeking shelter from a sandstorm of irradiated ash, and found, instead, a man kneeling before an altar made of bones. He turned when they approached, his respirator pitted, his robes stained with centuries of war. The soldiers raised their lasguns, uncertain if he was one of them or one of the faithless. But he spoke, and the sound silenced their fear. Lay down your arms, he said softly. You stand in the house of the Emperor. His walls may be gone, but his gaze remains. The men hesitated. They felt it, something ancient in his tone, like the echo of a truth they had forgotten. He rose slowly, leaning on a bent staff fashioned from a bayonet and a spine. I have walked through the ashes of 10,000 worlds, he said. I have seen faith burn, and I have seen it reborn in blood. You seek the Emperor's light? Then follow my voice. And they did. That night, he preached to them beneath the shattered cathedral dome. The wind screamed through the cracks like the wail of ghosts, and the stars above were veiled by smoke. But the priest's words carried rough, broken, yet unyielding. Brothers, he began, we are not his chosen because we live. We are his chosen because we die. We are the proof that devotion does not end where the body fails. We are the sermon that bleeds. Asterisk, the soldiers listened, and something ignited within them, not hope, but purpose. Asterisk, the next morning. They charged into battle without hesitation, and though only a handful returned, they spoke of the old priest as though he were a prophet. They called him the Pilgrim of Ruin. The priest's travels became legend. Asterisk, wherever he went. War followed not because he sought it, but because his words lit fires in the hearts of men already standing upon the edge. Asterisk, on Malafa's prime, he spoke before a garrison that had not seen supplies in 3 years. The soldiers had begun to doubt, to whisper treason, to pray not to the emperor, but to the void. The priest walked into their midst, placed his relic book upon the table, and began to speak of redemption through sacrifice. Asterisk, by dawn, the garrison had stormed the heretic fortress. None returned, but the fortress burned for 3 days. On Vrachus, he arrived to find an entire hive city in open revolt. He climbed the rubble of a manufactorum and recited a sermon over the voxcasters that still functioned. His voice echoed through the ruins hoarse, commanding, relentless. Asterisk, greater than faith is not light. Faith is fire. Asterisk, it consumes, it cleanses. Asterisk, it leaves nothing but ash, and in that ash, the emperor's truth is found. Asterisk, when the Arbites found him, the streets were full of the dead, both loyal and traitor alike. The city had devoured itself in his name. The priest did not smile. He only looked upon the carnage and whispered, "So it begins again." There were nights when even he doubted. Asterisk, when the wind carried the smell of decay, too thick to ignore, and the stars seemed cold and lifeless. He would kneel beside his fire and stare into the cracked glass of his respirator lens. Asterisk, what looked back at him was no saint, no prophet, no man, just a mask, a reflection of the faith he had spoken so long that it had begun to consume him. Asterisk. He opened his relic book, its pages waterlogged, many burned beyond recognition, and traced his finger across the one passage that still remained legible. Asterisk, greater than in the emperor's name, all things are justified. He stared at those words for hours. Once, they had comforted him. Now, they only accused. Asterisk, for in his heart, a whisper had begun to grow, one that no vox could silence. Asterisk, what if the emperor no longer listened? Asterisk, what if the sermons were only echoes, bouncing endlessly through a dead galaxy, heard by no one but the desperate? Still, he could not stop, because if he stopped speaking, if he stopped preaching, the silence would devour him whole. Decades passed. The priest became myth. Asterisk. He was said to appear on worlds seconds before their fall, his sermons rallying soldiers to suicidal valor. Others claimed he brought ruin that wherever he preached, madness followed. The ecclesiarchy branded him a heretic. The guard whispered his name as a saint. Asterisk, when a crusade fleet cornered him on the scorched moon of Paraxis, the cardinal himself demanded his confession. Asterisk, do you claim to speak with the emperor's voice? The cardinal asked, his jeweled staff glittering under the dying sun. Asterisk, the priest stood silent for a long time, his breath rattling through his mask. Asterisk, finally, he replied, no, I speak with my own. But if the emperor wills truth through lies, then let him judge me for it. The cardinal called for his execution. The priest did not resist. Asterisk, but when the firing squad pulled their triggers, the bullets passed through smoke. Asterisk, when the smoke cleared, he was gone. Asterisk, some say he was taken by the warp. Others, that he simply walked away. The soldiers who witnessed it called it a miracle. The ecclesiarchy called it blasphemy. Asterisk, but the people remembered, and in the trenches of 100 future wars, they whispered his words before charging into death. Asterisk. He preached until his voice broke. He preached when his lungs failed, through the rasp of a vox implanted into his chest. Asterisk. He preached when no one was left to listen, to ruins, to dust, to the bones of the fallen. His sermons became less of faith, more of reflection, as if he were trying to convince himself of something long forgotten. Greater than. We built our faith from the bones of the dead. We told ourselves it was mercy, but perhaps it was fear. Fear that if we stopped believing, all of this, all of us, would vanish. In the end, he came to a planet without name, where even the stars above had gone dark. He built an altar of scrap metal and burned his relic book upon it, as the flames rose. He lifted his hands to the heavens and cried out, not in prayer, but in defiance. Greater than. If you still see me, my lord, then tell me why. Tell me why I must speak when you are silent. The wind howled in answer. No divine voice came. No light pierced the sky. Only the echo of his own breath, rattling within the hollow mask. He sank to his knees, exhausted. For the first time in centuries, he allowed himself to rest. And when death finally came for him, it was gentle. He fell forward into the dust, his vox still active, whispering fragments of the sermons he had once spoken to armies. When the next regiment landed upon that world, they found him sitting upright against the altar, his body petrified by centuries of decay. The vox still hummed faintly. The soldiers gathered around the corpse and listened. Through the static, a voice murmured, soft, almost human, faith endures. Some claimed they saw light within his hollow visor. Others swore that, for a moment, they heard 1,000 voices singing through the static. The lost, the faithful, the dead, the soldiers, fell to their knees, believing they had witnessed the Emperor's blessing. Within a week, they had built a shrine. Within a month, pilgrims began to arrive. And within a year, they were killing each other over whose interpretation of his words was true. Centuries later, across the segmentum, obscurus new sermons echoed across war-torn worlds. They bore the same words, the same tone, the same desperate conviction. Priests preached until their throats bled. Soldiers listened, believing redemption was one more bullet away. The faith endured, not through truth, but through need. 4. In the Imperium of man, hope is a currency, rarer than light, and faith is the only thing that still burns when the stars themselves die. Somewhere, in the silence between worlds, the last echo of a broken priest's sermon still drifts, carried by the machine spirits of the void, across systems long since dead. Greater than. He is not listening, it whispers, but we still speak. Greater than. The Emperor never answers. He never needed to. His silence is the test, his absence, the crucible, and in that silence, man finds purpose. They call it faith. They call it madness, but it endures. As eternal as the war itself. The screen fades to black. The sound of the priest's voice, rasping, broken, yet resolute, lingers in the void. Greater than. We speak because we must. We believe because the alternative is nothing. And somewhere within it, the faintest echo of the trench choir returns, humming through the dark. Eternal as the Imperium's pain.